The greasy spoon aroma of the corner bistro in Astoria, Queens clung to Jessica Jess Miller like the city's humidity in August. At 25, Jess was practically a landmark there, known for a smile that could thaw even the most hardened New Yorker's heart. Life in the city was a constant scramble, especially with her mom, Patricia, locked in a relentless battle with a chronic illness. Jess juggled double shifts at the bistro, the tips and meager paycheck barely enough to cover Patricia's mounting medical bills and keep a roof over their heads in their cramped apartment. But Jess clung to a belief, a stubborn ember of hope in the concrete jungle, that even in the face of crushing odds, kindness still mattered. Lunch hour at the corner bistro was a chaotic ballet of clattering plates, sizzling grease, and shouted orders. Mr. Peterson, the manager, a man whose heart seemed as frozen as the winter wind whipping off the East River, prowled the floor, barking orders, his eyes like lasers scanning for any hint of inefficiency. Speed, efficiency, profit margins, these were his gods. Jess, however, saw the bistro as more than just a place to sling hash. It was a flickering beacon in the relentless city, a spot where people, even for a fleeting moment, could feel seen and cared for. In the relentless midday crush, a man shuffled into the bistro, his face a roadmap of hardship, his clothes hanging loose on his gaunt frame. He moved with a hesitant shuffle, like he was carrying the weight of the city on his stooped shoulders. His eyes, the color of faded denim, scanned the laminated menus with a mixture of hunger and something deeper, a raw, aching vulnerability. Something about his weary gaze, the way he seemed to shrink into himself, pierced Jess's usually cheerful armor. He approached the counter, his steps slow and deliberate, his hand trembling slightly as he fished out a handful of crumpled bills and loose change from his pocket. Jess watched discreetly as he inquired about the price of the day's special. A simple, no-frills meal. Salisbury steak, mashed potatoes, green beans. She could see, even from across the counter, that the meager collection of currency in his hand wouldn't be enough. A knot tightened in Jess's stomach. The bistro's policy, etched in stone by Peterson's ruthless efficiency drive, was absolute. No comps, no discounts, no exceptions. Peterson had drilled it into them endlessly. Time is money and charity is bad for business. But staring at the quiet desperation etched on the man's face, Jess felt something snap inside her. This wasn't just about a plate of food. It was about a human being teetering on the edge. Taking a breath, Jess made a snap decision. Her own wallet was thin, stretched tighter than ever, with Patricia's latest prescription refills looming, but she couldn't turn away. With a swift, practiced movement, she reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a few crumpled bills, her own hard-earned tips, and discreetly slipped them into the register drawer as she rang up the man's order. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of defiance and fear. "Don't worry, sir," she said, her voice soft but steady, trying to mask the tremor of nerves that threatened to betray her. "Your meal is already taken care of." The elderly man's head snapped up, his faded blue eyes widening in disbelief. For a moment, he just stared at her, speechless, as if he hadn't heard correctly. Then, slowly, a fragile bloom of gratitude spread across his weathered face, chasing away some of the deep lines of worry. You didn't have to do that," he murmured, his voice raspy with emotion, thick with a thankfulness that resonated deep within Jess. "Thank you, really." Jess just offered him a genuine, warm smile, the kind that had made her a favorite with the regulars. "It's the least I could do," she said, trying to sound casual, like paying for a stranger's meal was an everyday occurrence. She moved quickly, assembling the plate with practiced ease, the Salisbury steak sizzling, the mashed potatoes steaming, the green beans bright green against the white china. She placed the meal in front of him, the aroma of comfort food filling the small space between them. He carried the plate to a small table tucked away in a quiet corner of the bistro and began to eat, slowly, deliberately, savoring each bite like it was a rare delicacy. Jess watched him for a moment, a warm glow spreading through her, a quiet satisfaction that transcended the gnawing worry about her own finances. In the relentless grind of her life, this small act of kindness felt like a tiny victory, a fleeting moment of grace. But as Jess turned back to the counter, ready to plunge back into the lunchtime chaos, she saw him. Mr. Peterson stood a few feet away, his face a mask of cold fury, his eyes narrowed and sharp, like shards of ice. A chill snaked down Jess's spine. She knew, instantly, that he had seen everything. He stalked towards her, his footsteps heavy and ominous in the suddenly silent space around them. "I saw what you did," he said, his voice low and dangerously controlled, each word clipped and precise. You paid for that man's meal, didn't you? It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, a pronouncement of guilt. Jess's heart hammered against her ribs. The calm satisfaction she had felt moments before evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. She knew she had broken the cardinal rule, crossed a line that Peterson had drawn in blood. The thought of losing her job, her precarious lifeline, sent a wave of panic through her. Mr. Peterson, I just... She stammered, her voice catching in her throat, desperately trying to find words to explain, to justify, to somehow mitigate the inevitable. He really needed help. He didn't have enough. Peterson cut her off with a sharp, dismissive wave of his hand. Rules are rules, Jessica. No exceptions. I've made that perfectly clear. His gaze was unwavering, devoid of any empathy, any understanding. Kindness doesn't pay the rent, Jessica. Efficiency does. Then the words that shattered Jess's already fragile world. You're fired. The words hit Jess like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. She stood frozen, the clatter and noise of the bistro fading into a muffled hum, the world around her suddenly tilting off its axis. Fired. Just like that. For an act of human decency. A wave of injustice, hot and bitter, surged through her. But even as the panic clawed at her throat, a small, defiant voice whispered inside her. She didn't regret it. Not for a second. Jess watched the elderly man through the bistro window, still at his table, eating his meal with quiet contentment. She saw the gentle curve of his lips as he savored each bite, the peacefulness that had settled over his features. That image, that flicker of gratitude, somehow dulled the sharp sting of Peterson's words. It didn't erase the fear, the uncertainty that now loomed over her, but it gave her a strange sense of resolve. With heavy steps, Jess walked to the back, grabbed her worn-out jacket and her small bag of belongings from the employee locker. She didn't even bother to look back at Peterson, didn't want to see the cold satisfaction in his eyes. She walked out of the corner bistro and into the harsh glare of the afternoon sun, the city noise crashing around her. But the world seemed muted, gray, overshadowed by the crushing weight of unemployment. How would she tell Patricia? How would they survive? The rent was due next week. Patricia's medication refills were urgent, and now, nothing. Jess wandered aimlessly through the streets of Astoria, a ghost in her own neighborhood. Familiar storefronts, bustling cafes, vibrant flower shops blurred past her, unnoticed. Her mind was a chaotic whirlwind of anxieties, regrets, and a gnawing fear of the future. Peterson's cold, dismissive words echoed in her thoughts, intermingling with the image of the elderly man's grateful smile. Eventually, her feet led her to a small park tucked away between rows of brownstones, a pocket of green tranquility in the urban sprawl. It was a place she sometimes came to clear her head, a quiet refuge of rustling leaves and wooden benches. Jess sank onto a bench, the rough wood cool beneath her fingers, and watched children chase pigeons across the paved paths, their laughter a stark contrast to the turmoil inside her. It was hard to believe that just hours ago her life had been stable, if precarious. Now everything was uncertain, teetering on the brink. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath of the surprisingly fresh air, trying to anchor herself to the present moment, to find a sliver of calm in the storm raging within. Jess had always believed in the ripple effect of kindness, the power of small gestures to make a difference. But now, staring into the abyss of unemployment, she started to question everything. Had she been foolish, naive? Should she have swallowed her compassion, followed Peterson's rigid rules, and let the man walk away hungry? Was kindness always destined to lead to more trouble than it was worth? Lost in this spiral of self-doubt, she heard footsteps approaching, slow and hesitant. Opening her eyes, she saw him, the elderly man from the bistro, standing a few feet away, his face etched with concern. Miss, I hope I didn't get you in trouble because of me, he said, his voice hesitant, his shoulders slumped with a familiar weariness. There was a vulnerability about him, a quiet acceptance of hardship that tugged at Jess's heart. Jess shook her head quickly, a genuine smile softening her features. Don't worry about it, sir. Really, I did what I thought was right. She met his gaze, her voice regaining its usual warmth. I just hope you enjoyed the meal. The man nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. It was the first decent meal I've had in days. I don't know how to thank you. A wave of emotion washed over Jess, a profound sense of connection to the stranger. It was just a simple plate of food, a small act of compassion, but for him, it had been so much more. The empathy she had felt in the bistro surged back, stronger than before. "You don't need to thank me," she said gently. I just hope things get better for you." He hesitated for a moment, as if wrestling with something inside him, then took a step closer. My name is John Smith," he began, his voice gaining a little strength. "I used to be a mechanic, had my own shop, a good life once, but life just kept knocking me down. Lost my wife, lost my shop, lost my home, started wandering. Been like this for years." His voice trailed off, the unspoken stories of loss and hardship hanging heavy in the air between them. "But today, miss your kindness. It gave me something I haven't felt in a long time. Hope," Jess finished softly, the word resonating deeply within her. It was hard to fathom a life unraveling so completely, to imagine the crushing weight of despair he must carry, and yet a simple meal, a small act of human connection, had rekindled a flicker of hope. "John," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "we all go through tough times, but don't let it define you. There's always a way to start over, to find a new path." John looked at her, a mixture of surprise and gratitude in his faded eyes. I know you probably got your own problems, young lady, and yet you helped me. That gives me strength to try to get back on my feet." Before Jess could respond, a warm, confident voice spoke from behind her. "So you're the one who helped John?" Jess turned, startled, and saw a woman standing there, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her smile radiant and genuine. She looked to be in her late 40s, radiating an aura of both authority and warmth. "Excuse me for intruding," the woman continued, her voice smooth and polished. "I'm Martha Sterling. I saw what you did at the bistro, and I was deeply moved. John here has been telling me all about your generosity." Jess looked at John, then back at Martha, completely bewildered. I just did what anyone would have done," Jess stammered, trying to downplay the act that had just cost her job. Martha's smile widened, but her eyes held a deeper intensity. "No, dear," she said, shaking her head gently. "Not everyone would have done what you did." Jess was speechless, completely overwhelmed. She hadn't expected anyone to notice her small act, let alone for it to lead to this. John was visibly emotional, his eyes welling up again. Martha, this elegant stranger, had a presence that radiated both compassion and undeniable power. Jess didn't know what to say, how to process this sudden, surreal turn of events. "I saw you pay for John's meal at the bistro," Martha continued, her gaze fixed on Jess, unwavering. "And I also saw how that manager treated you afterwards. I couldn't believe what I was seeing." A fresh wave of humiliation and anger washed over Jess as Martha recounted the scene, the sting of her dismissal still raw. "Yes," Jess managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. "Mr. Peterson, he wasn't happy. He fired me." Martha shook her head in disbelief. "Unbelievable that something like this could happen in this city. You did a good thing, Jessica. A truly good thing. Something few people would have the courage to do. And you were punished for it." I understand he was just following the bistro's rules," Jess said, instinctively trying to find some justification for Peterson's harshness, even though deep down she knew it was fundamentally wrong. "But I just couldn't let John go hungry." It had been a split-second decision, driven by instinct, by a deep-seated sense of right and wrong. John, who had been silent, listening intently, looked at Jess with profound gratitude. "You did more for me than you can possibly know," he said, his voice thick with emotion but clear and steady. "It's not just about the food. It's about the fact that someone cared. Someone saw me." John's words resonated deeply within Jess. In the relentless rush of city life, it was so easy to become invisible, to overlook the people around you, especially those in need. The simple act of being seen, acknowledged, helped. It had a power she was only just beginning to understand. Martha, watching the quiet exchange between them, smiled softly. "John is right, Jessica, and what you did, it can't be overlooked." She paused, then leaned in slightly, her gaze assessing, thoughtful. "If you don't mind me asking, what are you going to do now?" The question caught Jess completely off guard. What would she do now? Without the bistro job, she had no income, no safety net. Patricia's medical bills loomed like a monstrous wave about to crash down on them. The crushing reality of her situation slammed back into her. I don't know," Jess admitted, her voice trembling, the carefully constructed wall of composure crumbling. I'm I'm worried about my mom. She relies on me. And without the job, I don't know how I'm going to make ends meet. Martha leaned in closer, her eyes holding a surprising warmth and understanding. You have incredible strength, Jessica. Do you know that? Even now, facing all this, you're still thinking of others. Jess didn't know how to respond. Martha's unexpected kindness was a balm to her wounded spirit, but the fear of the future still clung to her like a shroud. She had acted on impulse, led by her heart, but now she was facing the harsh consequences. Look, Martha said, her voice firm but gentle. I know we just met, but I have a proposition for you. Jess looked up, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and apprehension. What was Martha Sterling about to offer? I own an events company here in the city, Sterling Events, and I'm always searching for people with heart, with character. I saw how you treated John, how you put his needs before your own, even knowing you could lose your job. People like you, they're rare, Jessica. Jess's mouth dropped open. Sterling Events? It was one of the most prestigious event planning companies in New York. What was Martha saying? You mean... I want to offer you an opportunity, Jessica, Martha continued, her gaze unwavering. I believe you have a great deal to offer. And my company, we need someone with your work ethic, your compassion, your spirit. If you're interested, I'd like you to come work for me. Jess was completely stunned, frozen in disbelief. This woman, this stranger, was offering her a lifeline, a chance after everything that had just happened. It felt surreal, like a scene from a movie. I don't know what to say, Jess murmured, still reeling from the shock. John gave a small, knowing smile, his eyes filled with understanding. Looks like your kindness brought you a new chance, Jessica. You deserve it. Martha continued, her tone calm, determined. If you accept, we can talk about the details. I'm confident that this opportunity, it could change your life, Jessica, in a big way. Jess's heart was racing, a chaotic mix of fear and exhilaration. Just 2 hours ago, she had been fired, jobless, facing a bleak future. Now, she was standing in a park in Astoria with a stranger offering her an opportunity that seemed almost too good to be true. The uncertainty was still there, a shadow lurking at the edges of her hope. But suddenly, in the darkness, a light had flickered. A possibility had opened up. And for the first time since Peterson's devastating words, Jess felt a fragile spark of hope ignite within her. Jess walked home in a daze, her mind buzzing with 1,000 thoughts. The afternoon air, crisp and cool, did little to clear the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. On one hand, the raw sting of her dismissal still ached. The injustice of it all still burned. But on the other, this unexpected, almost miraculous opportunity dangled before her, offered by a woman she barely knew. A woman who seemed to see something in her that even she hadn't fully recognized. Each step felt heavy, laden with doubt, with unanswered questions. Could she trust Martha Sterling? Was this offer real, or was it some kind of elaborate mistake, a cruel twist of fate? She had just lost her only source of support, and now this seemingly perfect solution had materialized. A blessing disguised as a stranger in a park. The fear that it was all too fragile, too fleeting began to creep into her thoughts. She thought of Patricia, waiting at home, completely unaware of the emotional roller coaster Jess had just endured. She knew she had to tell her mother the truth. About the firing, about the unexpected job offer. There was no avoiding the conversation, and the thought of it tightened the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Patricia would worry, she always did. The bistro job, however meager, had been their anchor, their fragile hold on stability. Without it, arriving at their small apartment building, Jess paused outside the door, took a deep breath, and forced a semblance of calm. Patricia was in her usual armchair, sunlight streaming through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. She was reading, lost in the pages of a well-worn book, her face serene, peaceful. Even in her frailty, Patricia possessed an inner strength, a quiet resilience that Jess had always admired. A lump formed in Jess's throat as she watched her mother, so oblivious to the turmoil that had just consumed her daughter's afternoon. Hi, Mom, Jess said, forcing a smile as she walked into the room. Hi, dear, Patricia replied, looking up from her book, her eyes crinkling at the corners. How was work today? Jess felt her carefully constructed composure begin to crumble. It was always impossible to hide anything from Patricia. Sitting down on the edge of the worn sofa, Jess knew she couldn't prolong the charade. Mom, I need to tell you something, she began hesitantly, her voice trembling slightly. Today, at the bistro, something happened. Something that changed everything. Patricia's expression shifted instantly, concern clouding her gentle features. What happened, Jess? Are you all right? Jess took another deep breath, steeling herself for the inevitable reaction. Mom, I got fired. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Patricia's eyes widened, shock and disbelief rippling across her face. Fired? But why? You've always been so dedicated. They love you at the bistro. Jess recounted the story, starting with the elderly man, John, and his desperate hunger, explaining her impulsive decision to pay for his meal, Peterson's cold, unforgiving reaction, and the swift, brutal dismissal. Patricia listened in silence, her eyes fixed on Jess, her expression shifting from concern to understanding to a quiet sadness. When Jess finished, the small apartment was filled with a heavy silence. Patricia just sighed, a long, weary exhalation. "Oh, Jess," she said softly, reaching out to take Jess's hand in her own. "I know you did what you thought was right. Rules are just rules. But you followed your heart. But Mom, now what? We don't have any money. I don't know what we're going to do," Jess confessed, the dam finally breaking, tears welling up in her eyes, her voice thick with despair. I wanted to help someone, and now everything's gone wrong." Patricia squeezed Jess's hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Dear," she said, her voice calm and reassuring, even in the face of their looming crisis, "you did what any kind-hearted person would do, and we'll figure it out. We always do. Things are tough right now, yes, but you're not alone in this, Jessica. Never." Jess felt the tears spill over, a release of all the pent-up fear and anxiety. Her mother, even in her own vulnerability, was her rock, her unwavering source of strength. But before she could respond, she remembered Martha Sterling, the unexpected offer, the glimmer of hope in the darkness. "Mom, there's one more thing," Jess said, wiping her eyes, a fragile flicker of hope returning. After everything happened, a woman named Martha Sterling, she offered me a job." Patricia's eyes widened again, this time with surprise and a hesitant hope. "A job? Who is she?" Jess explained about Martha, about Sterling events, about the unbelievable opportunity that had materialized out of nowhere. Patricia listened intently, her expression shifting, softening, a tentative smile spreading across her face. That's wonderful, Jessica," she said, her voice filled with a cautious optimism. Maybe this dismissal, maybe it was a step towards something better." Jess, however, was still consumed by doubt, by the fear that it was all too fragile, too good to be true. "I know, Mom, but what if it doesn't work out? What if I mess it up? What if it's all just a dream?" Patricia squeezed Jess's hand tighter, looking deeply into her eyes, her gaze filled with unwavering faith. "Dear," she said, her voice gentle but firm, Sometimes life pushes us out of our comfort zones, pushes us off the path we thought we were on, to take us to places we never imagined we'd be. Trust yourself, Jessica. Trust in the kindness you've always shown. Good things. Good things happen to those who do good." Jess managed a weak smile, a tiny spark of hope reigniting in her heart. Maybe Patricia was right. Maybe this unexpected, chaotic turn of events wasn't a disaster, but an opportunity in disguise. She didn't have all the answers, the future was still shrouded in uncertainty, but at that moment, listening to her mother's unwavering faith, Jess decided she was willing to take a leap of faith, to step into the unknown and see what the future held. Jess spent a restless night, sleep evading her, her mind a battlefield of anxieties and nascent hopes. Martha Sterling's job offer seemed like a miracle, a lifeline thrown to her just when she was drowning. But a persistent, nagging voice of doubt whispered in the back of her mind, questioning its reality, its permanence. It was hard to believe that after such a devastating day, such a transformative opportunity could suddenly appear. She had heard stories of unexpected turns of fate, of lives changed in an instant, but now it was happening to her, and she was caught between exhilaration and a paralyzing fear of disappointment. The next morning, as she prepared for her meeting with Martha at her office, Jess tried to mentally armor herself, to temper her rising hopes with a dose of realism. She knew her life could pivot dramatically, depending on what transpired in that meeting. As she stepped out of her apartment building and into the crisp morning air, a gentle breeze seemed to whisper promises of new beginnings, of fresh starts. Yet, the doubt lingered, a shadow clinging to the edges of her optimism. The building that housed Sterling Events was a sleek, modern skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan, a world away from the cozy, worn-out charm of the corner bistro in Astoria. Towering glass windows reflected the bustling city, the energy of a million dreams colliding and intertwining. Jess walked into the opulent lobby, feeling small and slightly out of place in the face of such polished grandeur. The receptionist, all smiles and perfectly coiffed hair, greeted her warmly and directed her to Martha's office. When Jess stepped into Martha's office, she was struck by the panoramic city view, the sprawling cityscape laid out before her like a living map. Martha was standing by the window gazing out at the urban tapestry as if she had been expecting her. Turning as Jess entered, Martha's smile was as warm and welcoming as it had been in the park. "Jessica, I'm so glad you came. Please, have a seat." Martha gestured to a plush chair in front of her expansive desk. Jess sat down, trying to quell the butterflies fluttering nervously in her stomach. "Thank you for seeing me, Martha. I'm still trying to process everything that's happened." Martha chuckled softly, settling into her own leather chair behind the desk. "I can imagine. Fate has a funny way of working, doesn't it? A simple meal for an elderly man, and now here we are, talking about a new opportunity for you." Jess nodded, a small smile touching her lips, but the underlying tension remained. She looked at Martha, hesitant for a moment, then plunged into the question that had been gnawing at her all night. "Martha, please don't take this the wrong way, but why me? I'm not exactly someone with big qualifications. I worked as a waitress. I take care of my mom. What makes you believe I'm the right person for your company?" Martha's eyes sparkled with a knowing light, as if she had been anticipating this question. "Jessica," she began, leaning forward slightly, her voice earnest and compelling. "Let me tell you something. A long time ago, when I was starting Sterling Events, when I was just a young woman with a crazy idea and no experience, no one believed in me. Absolutely no one, except one person. One person saw something in me, something I didn't even see in myself. And that person's trust, it changed my entire life." Martha paused, her gaze locking with Jess's, her eyes filled with conviction. "Jessica, I see that same potential in you, the same spark, the same heart." Jess was silent, absorbing Martha's words, letting them sink in. It was hard to reconcile Martha's confident assessment with her own ingrained self-doubt. But something within her, a tiny seed of possibility, began to stir. Martha continued, her voice gaining intensity. "What you did for John that day at the bistro, it was more than just an act of kindness. It was an act of profound empathy. And empathy, Jessica, that's what I'm looking for in my team. The technical skills, the event planning specifics, you'll learn all of that. What can't be taught, what's truly invaluable, is heart. And you, Jessica Miller, you have heart in abundance." As Martha spoke, Jess felt a wave of emotion surge through her, a mixture of hope, disbelief, and a tremor of fear. She wanted to believe Martha's words, to embrace the potential she saw in her. But the persistent voice of self-doubt still whispered, insidious and undermining. "What if I fail?" Jess whispered, the question almost inaudible, more to herself than to Martha. Martha leaned even closer, her eyes unwavering, her voice firm and reassuring. "Failure is part of the journey, Jessica. It's inevitable. What matters, truly matters, is what you do after you fall. I don't expect you to be perfect. Perfection is an illusion. I expect you to be real, to be yourself, to bring that heart, that empathy, that genuine care to everything you do." Jess felt tears prick her eyes, a release of years of ingrained insecurity, of striving for an unattainable perfection. Martha's words resonated deep within her, touching on the core of her deepest fears and offering a liberating alternative. She had always believed that to be valued, she had to be flawless, invincible. Now, this powerful, successful woman was telling her that her humanity, her imperfections, her capacity for compassion were not weaknesses, but strengths. It was a revelation, overwhelming and profoundly freeing. Before Jess could find words to respond, the office door opened, and to her utter astonishment, John Smith walked into the room. But this was not the weary, threadbare man she had helped at the bistro. He was clean-shaven, his hair neatly combed, wearing a clean-pressed shirt and trousers. He stood taller, his eyes brighter, a spark of renewed vitality in his gaze. "John," Martha exclaimed, her smile widening. Come in. I wanted you to be here." John stepped forward, his gaze meeting Jess's, a warm, genuine smile spreading across his face. "Jessica," he said, his voice stronger, more confident than she had heard it in the park, "I wanted to thank you again for everything. He turned to Martha, then back to Jess. Martha's been incredible. She's helping me get back on my feet, finding me work, helping me find a place to live. Martha placed a hand on John's arm, her eyes filled with compassion. John is a good man, Jessica. He just needed a hand up, not a handout. She turned back to Jess, her gaze unwavering. And so do you, Jessica. We all do sometimes. Jess looked from Martha to John, a profound understanding dawning within her. This wasn't just about a job offer, it was about something bigger, something deeper. It was about connection, about compassion, about the unexpected ways in which kindness could ripple outwards, transforming lives, creating new beginnings. She took a deep breath, her heart still racing, but now with a different kind of energy, excitement, anticipation, a burgeoning sense of hope. Martha, Jess said, her voice clear and steady, a newfound confidence resonating in her tone. I accept. I want to work for Sterling Events. I want to learn, to grow, to be a part of something mighty meaningful. Martha's smile widened, radiating pure joy. Welcome aboard, Jessica. I knew you were the right person for us. Patricia smiled, squeezing her daughter's hand. I know you are. You've always been ready, even if you didn't realize it. The next morning, Jess woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. She carefully chose her best outfit, a simple but smart dress, determined to make a strong first impression on her first day at Sterling Events. As she arrived at the sleek, modern building, she was greeted by a welcoming team, their warmth immediately putting her at ease. Throughout the day, Jess dove headfirst into her new role. As Martha had outlined, her initial responsibilities focused on supporting the organization of smaller events, ensuring each client felt valued and their needs were met with meticulous care and attention. There was a steep learning curve from understanding the logistics of event planning to mastering the nuances of crafting personalized experiences, but Jess was invigorated by the challenge. For the first time in her working life, she found herself in an environment where her natural empathy and her innate ability to connect with people were not just tolerated but genuinely valued. With each client meeting, each logistical puzzle she helped solve, Jess's confidence grew, solidifying her belief that she had found her place. Martha and John remained constant pillars of support, offering guidance and encouragement whenever needed, but primarily, they provided Jess with the space to explore her own capabilities, trusting her to navigate the complexities of the event planning world. One afternoon, while reviewing the details for an upcoming charity gala, Jess noticed a stray piece of paper left on Martha's desk. Intrigued, she picked it up and saw it was a handwritten thank you note from a recently satisfied client. But it was the name signed at the bottom that caught her attention. Helen Carter. Helen Carter. The last name triggered a sudden memory, a faint echo of John's past. Could it be a coincidence, or was there a deeper connection, a hidden layer to John's story that she hadn't yet uncovered? Jess hesitated, a swirl of curiosity and a touch of apprehension mixing within her. But she decided, for now, to tuck the question away. There was work to be done, deadlines to meet, and she didn't want to appear intrusive or overly inquisitive. As the weeks unfolded, Jess felt herself settling into Sterling Events, feeling more and more at home amidst the organized chaos of event planning. It had become more than just a job. It was a creative outlet, a way to channel her inherent desire to make a positive impact, to curate moments that brought people together, that celebrated life's milestones. Her dedication and natural talent quickly became apparent, earning her praise for her meticulous attention to detail, her calm demeanor under pressure, and her effortless rapport with clients. Then, a few weeks later, Martha called Jess into her office for a private meeting. Jess walked in, a mix of curiosity and slight apprehension fluttering in her stomach. Martha greeted her with her usual warm smile, but there was a distinct air of significance in the room, a sense that this meeting was different. "Jessica," Martha began, gesturing for Jess to take a seat, her tone serious but encouraging. "I wanted to have a chat about something important." She paused, her eyes meeting Jess's with directness and genuine warmth. "Since you joined Sterling Events, I've been watching your progress, observing your work, and you've exceeded all my expectations." Jess's heart skipped a beat, a thrill of anticipation mixed with a surge of pride. She had been working tirelessly, pouring her heart and soul into this new opportunity, and Martha's words were incredibly validating. "Thank you, Martha," Jess replied, her voice sincere. "I've been working hard, trying to do my best." Martha nodded, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. "I know you have, Jessica, and that's precisely why I want to offer you a new challenge, a significant responsibility." She leaned forward, her gaze intensifying. "We have a major charity event coming up, one of the most important events on our calendar, something that's very close to my heart and to the company's mission. And I would like you to lead the organization of this entire event." Jess was momentarily speechless, her mind struggling to process Martha's words. Lead such a large-scale, high-profile event? Barely a few weeks into her new career, still feeling like a novice, and Martha was entrusting her with this immense responsibility. "Me? Lead this event?" Jess stammered, her voice laced with disbelief. "But Martha, I'm still so new here. What if I mess everything up?" Martha smiled reassuringly, her confidence in Jess unwavering. "Jessica, trust me, you have everything it takes to make this event a resounding success. I'll be here to support you, to guide you, to provide any resources you need. But I want you to take the reins, to own this project, to showcase your incredible talent. I have complete faith in you." Jess's heart pounded in her chest, a mix of exhilaration and sheer terror. It was the kind of challenge she had never envisioned for herself, a leap into the deep end. But if Martha Sterling, a woman of such acumen and experience, believed in her, maybe it was time for her to start believing in herself too. Jess left Martha's office in a daze, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. The opportunity she had just been given was enormous, a career-defining challenge that could solidify her position at Sterling Events and, more importantly, prove to herself that she was capable of far more than she had ever dared to imagine. But the weight of the responsibility was also immense, pressing down on her with a heavy hand. The charity event Martha had entrusted to her wasn't just any ordinary gala, it was one of the company's flagship events, deeply meaningful to Martha personally, and now Jess carried the burden of ensuring its flawless execution. In the days that followed, Jess threw herself into the preparations with relentless energy and focus. Late nights became the norm as she meticulously reviewed every detail, coordinated with vendors, and ensured that every aspect of the event was perfectly aligned with Martha's vision. Martha remained closely involved, providing guidance and support, but she also gave Jess the autonomy to make decisions, to shape the event with her own creative touch. The unwavering support from Martha and John, combined with Jess's tireless dedication, fostered an environment of trust and collaborative growth. But as the date of the charity gala drew closer, a knot of anxiety tightened in Jess's stomach. The pressure to deliver a flawless event, to meet Martha's high expectations, and to not let anyone down, kept her awake at night, her mind endlessly replaying checklists, scrutinizing seating charts, and second-guessing every decision. On the morning of the event, Jess arrived at the venue hours before anyone else. She wanted to personally oversee the final setup, to ensure every detail was perfect, from the placement of the floral arrangements to the subtle background music that would set the ambiance. As she watched the grand ballroom transform into a dazzling spectacle of elegance adorned with cascading flowers, shimmering fabrics, and soft, twinkling lights, a wave of accomplishment washed over her. She had poured her heart and soul into this event, navigating countless challenges, overcoming unforeseen obstacles, and now it was all coming together, a testament to her hard work and unwavering commitment. But just before the first guests were scheduled to arrive, as Jess was overseeing the final touches, ensuring the lighting was just right, she saw a familiar figure walk through the main entrance. For a split second, her heart stopped, her breath catching in her throat. It was Mr. Peterson. The same Mr. Peterson who had coldly fired her from the corner bistro just weeks ago. He hadn't spotted her yet, his gaze scanning the opulent ballroom, but Jess knew a confrontation was inevitable. Mr. Peterson, impeccably dressed in a sharp suit, was clearly one of the VIP guests mingling with the city's elite. Jess tried to maintain her composure, to push down the surge of anger and humiliation that threatened to overwhelm her. Memories of that day at the bistro flooded her mind. The injustice of her dismissal, the feeling of helplessness as her lifeline was abruptly severed, and now, here he was, at an event she was orchestrating, a world away from the Greasy Spoon diner in Astoria. Mr. Peterson finally turned, his eyes widening in recognition as he spotted Jess across the ballroom. He walked towards her, a mixture of confusion and disbelief etched on his face. "Jessica?" he said, his voice laced with astonishment, as if he couldn't quite comprehend her presence in such a setting. Jess took a deep breath. steeling herself for the uncomfortable encounter, trying to project an air of professionalism despite the turmoil churning within her. "Mr. Peterson," she responded, keeping her tone neutral, detached, carefully masking the emotions that threatened to betray her. "What are you doing here? Do you work here?" he stammered, genuinely bewildered, his carefully constructed composure momentarily faltering. Jess realized, with a strange sense of detachment, that he was completely unaware of the dramatic shift in her circumstances, unable to reconcile the image of the struggling waitress he had fired with the confident woman now overseeing a prestigious charity gala. "Yes, Mr. Peterson, I work here," she replied, lifting her chin slightly, a subtle touch of defiance creeping into her voice. "In fact," she added, her gaze unwavering, "I'm the one responsible for organizing this entire event." The surprise in Mr. Peterson's eyes was palpable, his jaw slightly slack, his carefully constructed facade of managerial authority crumbling. He seemed utterly incapable of processing the transformation, the stark contrast between the young woman he had so dismissively fired and the poised event planner standing before him. I had no idea," he murmured, at a loss for words, his usual cold demeanor replaced by a flustered awkwardness. Jess maintained her professional demeanor, but beneath the surface, her heart raced. She had a fleeting impulse to confront him, to unleash the pent-up resentment, to point out the sheer injustice of his actions weeks ago. But something held her back. Jess knew instinctively that this wasn't the time for retribution, for petty vindication. She had moved on, forged her own path, and her presence here, her success in this moment, was the most powerful response she could offer. "I hope you enjoy the event, Mr. Peterson," Jess said, offering him a polite, professional smile, before turning away to resume her final preparations. Mr. Peterson watched her for a moment longer, still visibly stunned, before giving a slight, almost imperceptible nod, and disappearing into the crowd of arriving guests. Jess felt the weight of the encounter slowly lift, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and a renewed sense of purpose. She had come so far since that devastating day at the corner bistro, and now here she was, on the verge of pulling off an event that would be remembered by many, a testament to her resilience and determination. As the guests began to arrive, the ballroom buzzed with energy, filled with laughter, animated conversations, and the soft strains of music. The event unfolded flawlessly, a seamless tapestry of elegance and generosity, and Jess felt a wave of relief and profound accomplishment wash over her. She had done it. She was finally where she was meant to be, in a place where her skills, her empathy, and her inner strength were not just recognized, but truly valued. Martha approached her as the evening drew to a close, her face beaming with pride. "Jessica, you did an incredible job," she said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "This event, it was perfect." Jess smiled, a deep sense of gratitude welling up within her. "I couldn't have done it without you, Martha, and without John." Martha nodded, her eyes glowing with warmth. "But in the end, Jessica, it was you. You made it all happen. I always knew you had it in you." Jess looked around the ballroom, filled with happy, satisfied guests, feeling an inner peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. The journey had been arduous, filled with unexpected twists and turns, but every challenge, every setback, had somehow led her to this moment. As the event concluded and the ballroom slowly began to empty, the last guests departing with smiles on their faces, many still buzzing about the flawless execution of the evening, Jess felt a rare sense of calm settle over her. After weeks of intense pressure and relentless work, everything had gone right. What had once felt like an overwhelming burden had transformed into an undeniable victory. While gathering some stray papers at the organization table, Jess heard footsteps approaching. She looked up and saw John walking towards her, a soft, sincere smile gracing his lips. "I told you you would do it," he said, his voice filled with pride and quiet triumph. "You turned tonight into something truly special, Jessica." Jess laughed, still slightly overwhelmed by the surreal nature of her transformation. "I don't know if I'll ever get used to this," she admitted, shaking her head in disbelief. "It still feels surreal." John shook his head, his eyes shining with admiration. "Believe me, Jessica, you're just getting started. And it all began," he paused, his gaze softening. "It all began with that day at the corner bistro. Your act of kindness, that was the spark that ignited all of this." Jess reflected for a moment, a profound sense of truth resonating within his words. It was true. A simple act of compassion, helping a man in need, had triggered a chain of events she could never have predicted, a ripple effect of kindness that had dramatically altered the course of her life. "Have you ever thought," Jess asked, her voice low, almost reflective, "that sometimes the most important things in life, they come from the most unexpected moments?" John nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a quiet wisdom born of hardship and resilience. "Always, sometimes what seems like the end is just the beginning of something much, much bigger." Before Jess could respond, Martha approached them, her face radiant with pure joy. "I knew you were the right person to lead this event, Jessica," she said, her voice brimming with genuine enthusiasm. "Tonight was a resounding success because of you. I am so incredibly proud of you." Already emotionally overwhelmed, Jess smiled, tears welling up in her eyes, a mixture of gratitude and profound relief. I just want to thank both of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Without your support, without your belief in me, I wouldn't have made it here." Martha took Jess's hand, squeezing it warmly. "You have a bright future ahead of you, Jessica Miller," she said, her gaze filled with confidence and unwavering faith. "And I am honored to be a part of it." John, always quiet and observant, stepped forward and added, "You've transformed your life, Jessica. What you've built here tonight, it's not just an event, it's a reflection of the incredible person you are." Those words struck Jess in a way she hadn't anticipated, resonating deep within her soul. For so long, she had underestimated her own abilities, allowing fear and self-doubt to hold her back. But now, standing in the afterglow of her triumph, she realized she had surpassed even her own expectations. She was no longer the uncertain young woman who had been unjustly fired weeks ago. Now, she was a woman who had earned her place, who had proven her worth, who had discovered the strength and resilience she never knew she possessed. Martha looked at her with a satisfied smile, and without losing her warm, encouraging tone, said, "Jessica, I think you should give the closing speech. There's no better way to end this night than with words from the person who made it all possible." Jess's heart leaped, a flicker of nervousness mixing with a surge of exhilaration. But she knew, instinctively, that she was ready. She walked towards the small stage set up in the center of the ballroom, took the microphone, and looked out at the remaining crowd, her dedicated team, the event volunteers, Martha and John, all the people who had helped make this night a success. I just want to thank all of you for being here tonight," Jess began, her voice a little shaky at first, but gaining strength and confidence with each word. "This event, it was more than just an organization, more than just a beautiful evening. It represents what we can achieve when we believe in ourselves, when we support each other, when we embrace kindness and compassion in a world that so often feels cold and indifferent." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room, connecting with each person in turn. "Just a few weeks ago," she continued, her voice filled with emotion, "I could never have imagined standing here before you organizing something so grand, so meaningful. But I've learned through this incredible journey that with courage, with support, and with a little bit of faith, anything is possible." Applause erupted, filling the ballroom, a wave of warmth and appreciation washing over Jess. As she stepped off the stage, Martha and John were there, waiting to greet her with warm hugs, genuine smiles, and unspoken words of pride and admiration. In that moment, surrounded by their unwavering support, Jess knew she had not only found her place in the world, but also a new kind of family, a community built on kindness, respect, and shared purpose. As she left the glittering ballroom that night and stepped out into the cool New York City air, Jess looked up at the star-dusted sky and took a deep, cleansing breath. It was the end of an important chapter in her life, a chapter marked by hardship, injustice, and unexpected kindness. But it was also undeniably the beginning of something even bigger, something brighter, something filled with limitless possibilities. The road ahead, she knew, would be full of new challenges, new obstacles to overcome. But now, armed with newfound confidence, surrounded by a supportive community, and guided by the unwavering belief in the power of kindness, Jess knew she was ready for whatever came next. Because in the end, what had started with a simple plate of food, a small act of compassion in a greasy spoon diner, had blossomed into a life filled with success, gratitude, and above all, a profound sense of purpose.